Hello, everybody. I am the proactive caregiver, and I specialize in educating others on how to be proactive by empowering you, the caregiver. Because if you cannot take care of yourself, then you cannot take care of your loved one. And on that note, today I want to talk to you about caregiver self care because it is more than just going and getting our hair or our nails done, or maybe even finally getting that awesome massage. Those are still very important things to do because they do make us feel good. But there are far more things that we kind of lose sight of as far as self care goes, because as caregivers, we tend to get a little hyper focused on our loved ones' needs and we forget about ourselves. So, what you may not realize, and what I didn't initially either, was that our body tends to store stress and traumas, especially in certain ways, even a long time ago. But as a caregiver, sometimes the challenges we face are also current traumas that our body's going to struggle to process. So no matter how much we are given recognition for being these wonderful caregivers, the sandwich generation is growing. The millennial caregivers are growing. Caregivers with stress and anxiety, all of it, health issues, all of this is growing because we're reaching territory, unknown territory that many of us did never expected to be here, especially in this capacity. We can't see this emotional bruising, I would call it, until our mental health begins to suffer. So at that point, self-care is really important, which is why today I asked my co-facilitator from the Refuel Support Group, Kaley Johnson, to join me. Kaley is amazing, okay? She is a certified health and life coach who specializes in supporting caregivers. She has a degree in human services and has been a professional caregiver for over 25 years. Kaley and her husband both were foster parents in the past, but in addition to the foster parenting, they have two sons. And more recently, she became a caregiver to her 92-year-old grandmother in helping the family as well. In response to her unique challenges of caregiving, Kaley created Spark Your Journey Coaching, because she wanted to help support caregivers to fill in those gaps along the way that we find with services. She understands firsthand that caregivers like you and me experience the loss of identity while caring for caregivers. But what I think is really cool is that when Kaley does get a break and she is helping herself with self-care, when she's not supporting others, she is actually having as much fun with family and working with her horses. So thanks for joining me today, Kaley.
Well, thank you for that warm welcome, Jessica. And I'm super, super excited to be here to be able to share with your proactive community. And so thank you very much.
Absolutely. So we've had this conversation before because as we get a chance to walk alongside other caregivers, we realize this topic of self-care is somewhat understood, but not always managed or maintained. As a caregiver, that life gets rough and the challenges that are place there as you experienced caring for your 92-year-old grandmother. How did that go for you during that time?
Well, I know for me, it's you just kind of get on autopilot and you just start going through the motions and you don't even realize like life just gets away from you until, like you said, it starts affecting your well-being or it starts affecting your physical or mental health. So yeah, for me, I really had to start to that started to happen for me. So I really had to tune in and start to understand what I could do with the periods of time that I did have, even if they were tiny little pockets.
Right, right. And those little tiny pockets are what we, a lot of times that's all we get. And we don't realize that the more we can take advantage of those moments, the better we're going to be overall. But we have to take advantage of those moments.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so what I really like to share with my community and with my clients is how to actually implement them into your daily life. Because if you talk about self-care, sometimes with caregivers, it's almost triggering. It's like, well, I don't have time for self-care. And, on the other side of it, really showing evidence that we really don't have time not to have self-care.
Right.
Because it affects us that much. Like literally, caregivers get sick at a much higher rate than non-caregivers. And this is the reason why, because we are not having our own needs or wants or desires being met.
Which is the sad thing. And I know that happened for me. I had my good routines. And then when I became mom's caregiver, and especially as in the later stages of her life with dementia, I completely lost sight of what I needed, what I wanted, until I was frustrated and just full of stress and anxiety and just kind of short with everyone else.
Yeah. That's my red flag. If I don't like myself, I know that that's my red flag where somewhere I've fallen off the track of caring for myself.
Right. Right. So we have a couple of different areas that I was mentioning, that there are several different types of self-care that caregivers don't consider just because of our day-to-day routines and how things go about. But one of the areas I wanted to start off with was mental self-care, because we do know to connect mental health, but don't really connect what is mental self-care. Can you talk a little bit about that for me?
Yeah. So mental self-care is really, really supportive of like nourishing our brain, if you can think of it like that. So it could be listening to your favorite podcast. Maybe it's the proactive caregiver that you're listening to, but you're listening to something that's lighting you up, that you're connecting with, that you're relating with. It could be reading a book. It could be starting a new hobby, or even going back to an old hobby that you've kind of let go. Just something, like I said, that's nourishing your mind through gaining knowledge that also is lighting you up, because it's bringing that spark, that joy.
Yes.
Back in, and like I said, it doesn't have to be hard. Like listening to a podcast I can do while I'm bathing my loved one, or while I'm doing the laundry, and this is where inviting it in and finding the possibility to practice self-care, where like you had mentioned, getting our nails done or a massage is very nice, but how do we practice it on a daily basis when those things aren't happening?
Right. Because on a daily basis, it's easy to go from waking up in the morning saying, oh, I feel wonderful, I'm rested, for a change. And by the end of the day, it is like the world is just weighing on us.
Yes.
Way more than ever before.
Yes. And so what I really like to share is that I kind of like to use this analogy. It's like swinging by the gas station on the way to a long road trip. Like we would never say, well, excuse me, I'm sorry, I can't come today because my car won't run because I just didn't have enough time to put gas in it. And literally, that's how much time that we're talking about. You can use these little pockets of time to to fill ourselves up, but we would never expect that from our car or our phone. Even like if we don't charge our phone, we aren't going to expect it to work. So if it's at 1%, we are going to create time to find a charger and plug it in, because we know we need to, and it's the same with us. So just kind of using those analogies, kind of it's harder for our brain to argue with or justify, not doing that. So I just like to use that analogy because because people can relate to it.
Absolutely. I was already thinking of the cell phone, charging the cell phone. I mean, that is something that we take our chargers everywhere we go because we know when we get there, we got to plug it in but it's just amazing that we know we need to do that. But when it comes to us,
Yeah.
our expectations of we can just run on fumes and just go and go and go, when that's not true. It's not good for us.
And then we get upset with ourselves because we couldn't do all the things.
Right.
Well, instead of stepping back and, wow, that was a lot on our plate, that maybe was some unrealistic expectations there. How can I show myself grace?
Absolutely. And that's where it comes into the emotional self-care. It was a perfect segue. Now, let's go into what it is for once you spend some time on your mental health self-care. What does that look like for the emotional side of it?
Yeah, so when we talk about emotional self-care, it's really referring to the ability to regulate our emotions. So many of us, myself included, at times have stuffed down emotions and unacknowledged feelings, and just keep pushing them down and really not dealing with them until all of a sudden, somebody might ask us where their socks are and we splash out, and then we feel guilty.
Right.
And so if you just, once again, another analogy of thinking of it like a pressure cooker, like that, there's so much pressure under there, you just barely touch that button to release. And it's just that person where, do you know where such and such is? And you're like, well, I don't know where your socks are. It's not my responsibility, or whatever it is. And then we sometimes can feel guilty about that. So just recognizing how important emotional self-care is so we don't get to that point. So here's the deal. If we don't digest and process our emotions really, truly on a daily basis, there's only so far they can be stuffed before, like I said, they come out in ways that we oftentimes don't like. But once again, we don't have to devote hours and hours here. It's a daily practice of just digesting your feelings and your emotions in this caregiver role, because oftentimes it comes with really heavy emotions. So just inviting them in, it can be as short as 3 to 5 minutes at a time. Like I said, it doesn't have to be a long time, but remembering that feelings are just sensations, that they can't hurt us, and they're just energy in motion. And so being able to process and digest them allows us to be able to release them.
Exactly.
If that makes
sense. I love that one.
Yeah. So really some healthy coping skills that you can use for tools to practice emotional self-care can be engaging in positive self-talk. It can be journaling. It can be using your I am statements. I am doing the best I can, even though, it's not working out, or this is still very challenging. Meditation is a great tool to exercise the emotional self-care. Practicing gratefulness. This is really hard, and I am grateful for, XYZ. It could be even calling and venting to a friend, but investing the time and energy in emotional self-care is very important. And like I said, it could be as small as 3 to 5 minutes. That's not the important part. The important part is the consistency.
Right. And I feel like this is one of those areas that once we get started, it's not as hard. It's getting started. It's taking the lid off the pressure cooker and just slowly letting it go, and then continually going. And then feeling safe in that once you do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a very beautiful way. Like, there's lots of resistance around feeling sometimes negative emotions. So really that's why some of the tools can be great practices. Like, okay, I'm just going to start with journaling for 2 minutes at the end of my day and just see what comes up for me. Just see what happens. Or maybe I'm going to listen to a 5-minute meditation when I wake up in the morning. Just keeping it easy and simple, but inviting in those tools to just try to practice new ways so that, we can create one that works best for us.
Yeah. And the cool thing about doing something like journaling, you don't have to sit there and write a whole paragraph or a full page. You can just put like a description. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling betrayed. I'm feeling heartbroken. I'm feeling lonely. I mean, simple. Keeping it simple.
Yes, because if our feelings are acknowledged and validated, that's what they're looking for, truly. And you're doing that, you're acknowledging and validating them.
Exactly. So true. And then once we go through, we're going to build on this. So we have our mental self-care and our emotional self-care. We should be feeling a little bit better, in a better state of mind. So now we can take this and go into our physical self-care.
Yeah.
So a lot of this is exercise, where this is, I think, the meat of it, the nugget here of self-care, because this is where most of the caregivers, including myself, will have those days. And especially when they're consistent days, when it's not just a good day, a bad day, but there's consistent bad days, that when the time does come around for some physical self-care, I'm too tired to do this. I'm upset. I'm depressed. I don't want to move. I don't want to get the exercise. How do we help caregivers break that kind of mental programming?
Yeah, because oftentimes, like you said, we don't feel like it. And guess what? That's always going to be the hardest part. But if we can fast forward and we cognitively know that when we do any kind of physical movement, it releases endorphins.
Yes.
So if I'm feeling low on energy, if I'm feeling sad, if I'm feeling depressed, this is my medicine right now. I'm going to get up and start moving, even when I don't feel like it, because I know that's going to help me feel better. I mean, science shows, the medical field agrees, this is how the best way to feel better. And physical movement also can give you energy. I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive. Obviously, if we're running a marathon, I'm not talking about that. But if you go out for a 10-minute walk, which I do every day, and my mentor calls it the dopamine walk, and just get out for a 10-minute walk, you are releasing that dopamine in your brain. So now you're feeling better. Now you have more energy. Now that thing that seemed so challenging is still challenging, but you may have new possibilities, or maybe you have that extra spark of motivation to just dive in. And it doesn't have to be going to the gym. I mean, it definitely can be, but oftentimes for caregivers, that's not an option. So it can be as easy as, like I said, going for a walk. You could a bike ride. You could do a movement class on YouTube for free. You can have a dance party in your kitchen with your kids, your loved one, or your dogs. And I know some of my clients, their loved ones, they participate in the dance, especially if it's music that's from their era. Even if they're sitting in a chair, they can still move their body. And that dancing is great cardio. You dance 3 or 4 songs and you've really got good cardio going on.
I agree. I had an opportunity when after mom passed, I started to get into that grieving mode, and I started joining a Zumba class, and I was a little skeptical, but it was the best thing I could have done. Yeah. It wasn't just energy, it was the mental clarity. And I did feel so much better afterwards.
Yeah. And I love that you say that mental clarity, because committing to, like, for instance, for me, I do yoga every day, and committing to that, I'm covering some emotional self-care, I'm covering some mental self-care, and I'm also getting in my physical self-care with just one activity. So this doesn't have to be hard. We get to keep it super easy.
Right. And I love it when it combines several areas, because then we were really making the most of those short moments.
Right. Yep.
So then as we continue on, getting out into some of those activities by chance, the physical activities, we could also include the social self-care, because caregivers often talk about being isolated. I know I felt that, stepping away from the corporate world and getting into mom's world, it got small really fast. And so needing conversation and connection with others. Can you share a little bit more about this social self-care?
Yeah, well, social self-care is so important for, number one, because we're social creatures. And so just, thinking that we're just going to be fine isolated in a house with our loved one day in and day out is a recipe for disaster. So just saying that out loud and recognizing, okay, so how can I make this work, and how can it be easy? Like, really trying to connect with somebody who intentionally, who really lights you up. or you love their energy is such a healthy practice to choose those people when you do connect. So it can be as simple as I'm gonna go on the deck for 15 minutes and meet my neighbor, and we're gonna have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. It could be somebody's coming over for dinner because I'm here with my loved one most of the time, but they're coming over for dinner. Or it could look like even on a Zoom. I know when we were deep into COVID and that wasn't really a thing, Zoom was really, really important for that social piece. And I also like to add, oftentimes the loved one has a great time with Zoom, and it gives you a break because now they're talking and interacting with somebody else for a little while. That just kind of gets their brain onto something else. So anyway, so social self-care is really, really important. But once again, I hear, well, what if I can't leave? Well, we can still invite it in those types of ways.
Right. And not letting the fact that you can't leave your home because your loved one needs a specific kind of care, or their limitations or their abilities are creating boundaries to the point where that means you do have to stay home. But bringing it in doesn't mean you can't have it. And I know in some cases, I definitely felt like inviting someone into our home was a little bit of a stressor at first, because I'm wondering how my mother would react. But getting my mother into some sort of comfortable space, whether she was watching TV or not, that meant I could step away just a little bit to have that conversation, or that person that come in, or I'm on a Zoom while she's comfortable and content.
Right. Yeah. And that's just so important that, we also give ourselves permission. Oftentimes somebody might say, well, what if my loved one, will get upset with that? Well, sometimes we have to tune into what's going to be healthy for us as well. And really navigate that instead of just crossing it off the list as, I can't do that.
Right. Yeah, definitely not crossing it off the list. Changing around the time of when we can have it, but not crossing it off the list, because it's definitely, like you said, we are social creatures. So as we are adapting and doing all these physical things, because we can even enjoy that and join together the social part of it with the physical activity and the emotional part of it and the mental piece of it. But then there's this other area that I know I was experiencing the need for more, which is the spiritual self-care. Let's dive into that one a little bit.
Yeah. So the spiritual self-care is really, it can be religion, but it doesn't have to be. It could be as simple as connecting with nature, or connecting through prayer, meditation. It could include connecting through God if that's your belief system. But the biggest part is connecting with your soul and your inner spirit, whatever that means to you. And that part is super, super powerful as a caregiver, because it helps us get into like that gratefulness. It helps us see it through a different lens. And so just inviting that in a way that makes sense for you.
Absolutely. Because like you said earlier, and when I get to the point when I know I don't like to be around even myself, like what's wrong, what's happening, I can't get away from myself, I need some spiritual connection and dialing back into, okay, what's going on here? What's happening?
Absolutely.
And that's something that it may be a little challenging, but once you get into this social self-care and you have your network and you have your people that bring you energy and light you up, then you're usually going to find someone in a group that is also that spiritual support network as well.
Definitely. Yeah. When you start connecting with people, the sky's just the limit, and when it can, and like you said, it can become very isolating as a caregiver. So really resisting those feelings of, oh, I can't, or I don't have time, or nobody will understand, that's even why we offer the Refuel Support Group as a point of connection.
Exactly. Because it is so easy to say, oh, I'm just not going to do this today. Oh, it was such a rough day. I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll try next week. And we'll just keep putting it off and putting it, because it is too easy to do.
Yeah. Yeah. If we don't have accountability, it's too easy to sneak out the back door on ourselves.
Basically.
Mm-hmm.
So, for the caregivers that are actually still working, and maybe even for those that are trying to maintain work and work from home while they care for their loved ones, can you talk a little bit about the professional self-care?
Yeah, absolutely. And during COVID, a lot of people ended up working from home. So then they were doing their caregiver role while they were doing their employment, which I know made it very challenging for many of the clients that I was connecting with. But being able to practice that self-care in the situations for professional self-care is setting timers or reminders on your phone to take a lunch break. Oftentimes, we're just trying to get done as fast as we can so we can go on to the next thing. But
Right.
that's really important to take a break and to eat, to nourish your body in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Even to get up and walk around every hour for just like a minute or two is really powerful for our mind. Like we can focus and focus and focus, but if we get up and walk around and just have that mindful break, not scrolling on a phone or social media or something like that, but actually getting up, walking around, maybe sticking our head outside in the sunshine, taking in some fresh air, that mindful break can really be a great way to nurture ourselves during that work day. But it also could look like setting boundaries for yourself when you get home from work. It could look like choosing to not maybe check emails after a certain time of
True.
evening, because now I'm starting to get reeled into the meeting tomorrow morning now that they didn't understand, or all of this, and
Right.
it's taking away from my evening with my loved one or with my family, because now I'm distracted with the tomorrow's problems.
Right. And that is a challenge, because we can do all the things, and that's what I got caught up with for myself. I can do all the things. I can be all things, do all things with for the longest time Philippians 4:13 was my motto, just about I can do all things through him who gives me strength. That doesn't mean I needed to do all things, or that I should be doing all the things. So unplugging every now and again, that's self-care in itself.
Exactly. And I love the quote that we can do anything but not everything.
Right. Right. And it's
Mm-hmm.
so easy as the care, especially when we start taking it on. I have to do this, and I have to do this, and I have to do that. Then we slowly but surely start programming ourselves of all this list growing, all the things I have to do, and I forget about all the things I need to do that would feed my soul, would calm my mind, uplift my heart, all of those things. But that's not on my to-do list because I'm so focused. My loved one needs, I have to.
Yeah, so I love that you say that too, because so often I remind people, if we're not on our list, it doesn't happen. So you need to
Yes.
be on your list and not at the bottom of the list, because oftentimes we don't make it to the bottom of our list. So
Right.
being on your list multiple times a day for just even those short periods of time, to just be checking in with yourself, to just be acknowledging, to be validating, to be, oh yeah, I matter too. And
Mm-hmm.
then that really releases a lot of the resentment. It releases a lot of the guilt. It releases a lot of those really heavy emotions that come with caregiving. Um, so yeah, that part's really, really
I
important.
love it the way you say that too, as far as putting yourself on the list multiple times. Because I could say, going to the gym, or on one thing on a particular day of the week, or for now, Zumba, Monday night, Zumba, or, but Monday during the day, having those reminders set up. And sometimes, even for the family caregiver that is at home and is not having to deal with the trade of office work, email, and caregiving for our loved ones, but still being able to put something on your phone as a reminder that pops up every, I don't know, 3 hours, 4 hours, that says step outside on the back porch, get some fresh air.
Yeah.
Go take a couple of deep cleansing breaths and then come back inside. And another one a couple hours later that says, go walk to the mailbox and back. And hopefully it's not just to your curb and the street.
Yeah.
But either way, I mean, doing
but
those
even
little
2
things
minutes can really shift our central nervous system.
Yes.
That 2 minutes of intentional breathing, that 2 minutes of stepping outside, letting the sun shine on your face.
Exactly.
That can really that's all it really takes to reset our central nervous system if we have the intention of that, if that's our intention.
Right. And the intention has to be set. We have to set that intention.
Yeah.
But I think the more caregivers understand what self-care can be, and how simple they can keep it in those short increments, then it becomes easier to set the intention. And it gets that ball rolling so that when you set that intention and you realize how good you feel, you want to continue setting that intention.
So then it's not a hard sale,
right?
Because they're getting the result that makes them feel better, and that's what we're all looking for, is to feel better.
Right.
So we truly want to find what feeds our soul and what fills up our cup, and it literally goes hand in hand with making ourselves a priority in our life. And when we do this consistently and apologetically, unapologetically, we can show up for ourselves, because we understand that is how we are actually free of overwhelm or free of the exhaustion, because we're showing up for ourselves now too.
Right. Right. And the challenge here with this is that oftentimes the caregiver is experiencing grief on some level, because whatever stage their loved one's illness is, or however chronic it is, or the challenges they're presented with, it keeps us almost in that constant state of grieving. And sometimes some days are lighter and some days are heavier, but those are the times when we need the self-care the most. It is something that I feel, if I left my self-care regimens, just kind of pushed it away, because I felt like the emotional grieving was taking over, or, and there is something to say that resting is good when you get the chance. But at the same time, denying yourself these other areas, it kind of compounds the grieving. And it just, not that it prolongs it, because we all grieve in our own time period, but it does make it feel more painful when we're not feeding ourselves in these other ways.
And during that time of feeling that grief, we have a lot of resistance around being inspired to do self-care.
Yes.
So knowing that is, that's the way out of the heavy feelings, is to start, tuning into what we need, and how can we be a caregiver and care for ourselves too, the and instead of the or.
Right.
And just how beneficial it is when we start doing these things. And like we had talked about, especially physical movement is such, it supports our mental health, it supports our physical health, it supports our emotional health. And it's easy. Like I said, we could turn on some music and dance. It doesn't have to be hard, but knowing that is more powerful than oftentimes medications that we can take.
Absolutely. I agree so much. It's funny how I heard it before, and then I actually started practicing it. And so cooking in the kitchen, I started turning on the music more. And especially lately, I've been having this desire to listen to more Mediterranean guitar, and love it because it gets me moving and going. I guess the Zumba is rubbing off on me more ways, but it feels so good. Even cooking dinner, something that would normally be like, oh, I've got to cook dinner, I've got to do all the preps, but it's like, oh, I get to cook dinner and dance at the same time now, and it's a different mindset, and it feels so much better.
And so when you can marry something pleasurable with something that is kind of a chore, it shifts your perspective of it. So oftentimes my clients will listen to podcasts while they cook, or listen to music. So now I only listen to that say it's a true crime podcast or something, see what
Right.
happens next, or my audio book, what happens in the next chapter when I do this thing that is kind of challenging, because
Right.
I'm now connecting something pleasurable with something that's hard, and now it's not so hard anymore. So really just these little hacks that make, some of the mundane things a little easier.
I love it. I love it because over a period of time, we take those advantage of those little moments, but we're really kind of slowly reprogramming our minds in a
Yes.
positive way so that we're not stuck in the negative, oh, I have to do this, I should do this. And oh, Lord knows I've had those days where I could should myself to death.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is a habit I also had to break with the positive self-talk.
Yeah, so the awareness is huge. Awareness of all of these pieces is huge, and then starting to implement it in our life. And everybody, it's different for everybody, but really tuning in and having that support of how to do that. And all of these places that, all of these self-care places are not meant to overwhelm anyone. They're just meant to check in and see where you could use some nourishment in your life. Like, oh yeah, that emotional one would really be beneficial for me. Or, the social one, oh, I guess that really wasn't on my radar, or the spiritual or professional, whatever it is. So really recognizing that we don't have to get up tomorrow and do all of these things, but these are just other ways that are easy that we can invite into our daily life.
Exactly. And once you start enjoying it, the more you're going to fight for it. So it's easier to set boundaries around them when it comes to family or work related obstacles. I'll just put it that way. We all have deadlines of some kind of at some point in time. But when you put that boundary there, you're changing yet again how you're going to treat yourself and how you want others to treat you, and how you turn and then show up for your loved one re-energized and in a positive, happy, let's do this, instead of like, oh my gosh, we survived another day. It's such a change in mindset.
Absolutely. And when we practice self-care regularly, we're really learning to invite in self-compassion and self-love, which ultimately is what self-care is. Yeah. So like you said, really, really coming back to connecting with ourselves and giving ourselves permission to be loved as well.
Right. Oh, thank you so much for taking the time to go over these and break them out, because I know in the beginning, when I first started caring for Mom, to me, getting away for self-care was any chance I got away for a massage or a pedicure. But all these other areas, it was just like blind spots on getting the emotional self-care or the spiritual self-care, and especially the social self-care. So I appreciate you taking the time to dig into these with us.
Yeah, well, I've absolutely loved having this conversation with you and just bringing it to the forefront of people's minds so we can keep it easy, especially for caregivers, because they already have so many challenges already. Just stepping into it to a way that we can keep it easy. Like I said in the beginning, sometimes this can almost be a triggering conversation for caregivers. So letting go of that mindset and just saying, oh, okay, it's as simple as XYZ.
Right. And I have to give Erin, and she'll know who this is, Erin, a shout out, because the message of kiss, give a kiss, keep it simple, silly. She said something else, but I changed it to silly.
yeah, I love it. Keep
it simple, silly. So
I love that. That's awesome. So yeah, because the minute we make it hard, we don't do it. And then we have 150 reasons why we can't.
Right. And we're not helping ourselves at that point. And we'll feel it eventually. Like I said, we don't realize how much of a change it is until our mental health is suffering, or our health in overall is suffering.
Yeah. So really tuning in and shifting our mindset and really letting go of the old story around self-care that oftentimes I know I signed up for.
Right.
Once again, building awareness around those old thoughts that aren't serving us, and then choosing a new simple tool that we could practice.
Absolutely. So for the caregivers who want to get a little bit more help with their self-care, how do they find you, Kaley?
The best place to find me is at the Healthy Caregiver on Facebook. It's my Facebook group. And so it's just the Healthy Caregiver. And I offer free events. We do master classes, we do challenges, we do workshops for we do mini courses, all
Nice.
sorts of different free events for caregivers. And we have prizes, we have fun. But the most biggest pieces, we really are there to support caregivers. So that's the best place to find me. We also have special guests as well. So lots and lots of good stuff happening in the Healthy Caregiver. And then you can also find me, and my email is Kaley, Kaley.Johnson 8342 @gmail.com. And I have a website, sparkyourjourney.net.
Awesome. Well, I hope caregivers are hearing this information and they're realizing, oh, I didn't even consider this. I'm going to have to look into this a little bit more. I'm going to have to practice a little bit more on one area or another, or several for that matter. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to your community.
Absolutely. We are trying to help caregivers as much as possible. And so taking a lot of what we recognized in our refuel and expanding on it, taking the time to be able to expand, has been on my mind a lot lately. Thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. I hope this episode definitely gave you more food for thought. You can also find more episodes like this or blogs and even merch on proactivecaregiver.com. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, be proactive. Take care.